For years, one of BMW's greatest creations officially didn't exist. There were no advertisements, no press launches, and no customers who could buy it. Yet hidden behind the walls of BMW Motorsport, engineers were secretly developing a machine that many believed would become the company's first true supercar. Its name was M8. It promised to be faster, more powerful, and more advanced than anything BMW had ever built before. But just as the project reached its most exciting stage, it vanished. The public never saw it, production was cancelled, and for decades BMW barely acknowledged that the car had ever existed. Instead, the world received something very different, the BMW 850CSi. To most people it looked like the ultimate version of the elegant 8 Series. But enthusiasts eventually realized it was much more than that. Hidden beneath its understated styling was the closest thing the world would ever get to the lost M8. To understand why this happened, we need to return to the late 1980s. BMW wanted to prove that it could build far more than sports sedans. Mercedes-Benz had its prestigious SL, Ferrari and Porsche dominated the supercar world, and Japanese manufacturers were preparing technological masterpieces like the Honda NSX. BMW decided the time had come to create an entirely new flagship, a grand touring coupe unlike anything the company had ever attempted. The result was the E31 8 Series. When it debuted in 1989, it immediately looked like the future. Gone were the sharp lines of the previous generation. Instead, the 8 Series featured smooth aerodynamic styling, hidden pop-up headlights, pillarless windows, and advanced electronics rarely seen in production cars at the time. It became BMW's most sophisticated road car ever built. Under its long hood sat a magnificent 5.0-liter naturally aspirated V12, paired with either a 6-speed manual or a 4-speed automatic transmission depending on the market. The 8 Series wasn't designed to replace the legendary 6 Series. It was designed to move BMW into an entirely different league. But while customers admired the luxurious Grand Tourer in showrooms, another team inside BMW Motorsport had a far more ambitious vision. They believed the elegant coupe could become something extraordinary. Engineers began developing a full M version that pushed the platform to its absolute limits. The car was internally known as the M8, and unlike the standard 850i, almost every major component was redesigned. The heart of the project became a naturally aspirated 6.1-liter V12 known internally as the S70. Producing well over 550 horsepower, it would have made the M8 one of the fastest production cars on Earth. Massive air intakes, dramatically wider bodywork, lightweight composite panels, racing-inspired suspension, and extensive aerodynamic development transformed the elegant Grand Tourer into something that looked ready for Le Mans rather than public roads. Perhaps the most fascinating detail is that this incredible engine refused to disappear even after the M8 project was cancelled. Several years later, BMW engineers evolved the same basic S70 architecture into the legendary V12 that powered the McLaren F1, one of the greatest supercars ever built. In other words, part of the lost M8 survived by becoming the heart of an automotive icon. Personally, I think that's one of the most incredible what-if stories in automotive history. Imagine if BMW had actually released the M8 in the early 1990s. It could have challenged Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Porsche years before the company ever entered the modern supercar market. But reality had other plans. As development progressed, the global economy entered recession. Sales of expensive luxury coupes began falling. The standard 8 Series was already proving difficult to sell because of its enormous price, and BMW executives started questioning whether the world really needed a 550 horsepower V12 super coupe that would cost even more. The engineers believed they had built the ultimate BMW. The accountants believed almost nobody would buy it. In the end, the accountants won. The M8 project quietly disappeared behind closed doors, leaving behind only a single fully functional prototype. Yet BMW Motorsport refused to let all of its work go to waste. Instead of abandoning everything, the company decided to preserve part of the project's DNA in a car that enthusiasts could actually buy. That car would become the BMW 850CSi. The BMW 850CSi wasn't created as a replacement for the M8. It was created as a compromise between an impossible dream and economic reality. But sometimes compromises turn into masterpieces, and that's exactly what happened here. Although the outrageous 550 horsepower supercar never reached production, BMW Motorsport refused to throw away years of engineering. Instead, the team carefully adapted many of the lessons learned during the secret M8 program into a road car that could realistically be sold. The result was the 850CSi, and despite the subtle badge on its trunk, many enthusiasts still consider it the closest thing BMW M has ever built to a true grand touring supercar. At first glance, the differences between a standard 850i and the 850CSi seemed surprisingly modest. Unless you knew exactly what to look for, you might only notice the deeper front bumper, revised mirrors, slightly lower suspension, unique wheels, and quad exhaust tips. But beneath the elegant bodywork, almost everything had changed. BMW Motorsport engineers completely reworked the chassis, reinforced the suspension, sharpened the steering, upgraded the brakes, recalibrated the electronics, and transformed the entire personality of the car. Even the rear-wheel steering system was revised to improve stability during high-speed autobahn driving. This wasn't simply a luxury coupe with more power. It was engineered to feel alive in a way the standard 8 Series never could. At the heart of the transformation was one of the greatest engines BMW has ever produced. The magnificent S70 V12 V12 displaced 5.6 liters and produced 380 horsepower along with 550 Nm of torque. On paper those numbers may not sound extraordinary by today's standards, but numbers rarely tell the whole story. This engine wasn't designed to impress people with massive horsepower figures. It was built to deliver endless, effortless performance with incredible smoothness and instant throttle response. Every press of the accelerator was accompanied by the unmistakable sound of 12 naturally aspirated cylinders working in perfect harmony. Personally, I think the S70 is one of the most underrated engines in automotive history. It represented everything BMW engineering stood for before turbochargers became the industry standard: balance, precision, mechanical refinement, and emotion. Even more importantly, the 850CSi could only be ordered with a 6-speed manual transmission. There was no automatic option. BMW believed that anyone buying its ultimate Grand Tourer should experience complete control over the V12, and that decision instantly separated the car from many of its luxury-oriented rivals. Every gear change reminded the driver that this wasn't simply an executive coupe built for effortless cruising. It still carried the DNA of BMW Motorsport. Looking back today, it's difficult to imagine a company offering a naturally aspirated V12 paired exclusively with a manual gearbox. Modern emissions regulations, changing customer preferences, and increasingly complex electronics have made such combinations almost impossible. That's one reason the 850CSi has become so respected among collectors. It represents a philosophy of engineering that has almost completely disappeared. During the early 1990s, the competition was fierce. Mercedes-Benz offered the luxurious SL600, Porsche continued refining the legendary 911, Ferrari had the 512 TR, and Jaguar entered the market with the dramatic XJ220. Yet BMW deliberately refused to chase the same formula. The company wasn't trying to build the loudest or fastest supercar. Instead, it created something remarkably unique, a machine capable of crossing entire countries at extraordinary speeds while surrounding its occupants with silence, comfort, and impeccable build quality. It wasn't a race car pretending to be civilized. It was a Grand Tourer capable of performing like a supercar whenever the road demanded it. That philosophy made the 850CSi one of the greatest autobahn machines ever created. Few cars of its era felt so composed above 200 km per hour. The long wheelbase, sophisticated suspension, and naturally aspirated V12 worked together to create an almost surreal sense of stability. Drivers often described the experience as deceptively calm. The speedometer climbed effortlessly, wind noise remained minimal, and the engine barely seemed to notice the increasing velocity. It was the kind of car that encouraged high-speed driving not through aggression, but through absolute confidence. Of course, that engineering excellence came at a price. The 850CSi was incredibly expensive when new, costing significantly more than many competing sports cars. The early 1990s recession only made matters worse. Luxury coupe sales collapsed across Europe and North America, and customers who could afford such an exclusive automobile often chose more traditional sports cars instead. BMW had created one of the finest grand touring machines in the world, but the market simply wasn't ready for it. Between 1992 and 1996, only 1,510 examples of the 850CSi were produced, making it one of the rarest BMW M-developed road cars ever sold. Ironically, that commercial disappointment became one of the main reasons for its legendary status today. As years passed, enthusiasts gradually discovered what BMW had quietly hidden beneath the elegant bodywork. They realized the 850CSi wasn't just another version of the 8 Series, it was the surviving spirit of the cancelled M8 project. Every drive became a reminder of what could have been if BMW had decided to ignore accountants and let its engineers finish the supercar they had dreamed about. And perhaps the most fascinating chapter of the story came years later, when enthusiasts learned the truth about the lost M8 prototype. After decades of secrecy, BMW finally revealed the one surviving prototype to the public. People were stunned. The aggressive wide-body design, enormous cooling vents, stripped racing-inspired interior, and monstrous V12 looked nothing like the refined 850CSi sitting in dealerships during the 1990s. It wasn't simply a faster 8 Series, it was a genuine supercar hiding in BMW's archives for decades. Suddenly, the 850CSi became even more significant. It was no longer seen as the most powerful 8 Series. It became the final connection to one of the greatest automotive projects that never reached production. And that's a story very few cars can tell. The BMW 850CSi was never the fastest car of the 1990s. It never broke world speed records, it never dominated Le Mans, and it was never produced in large numbers. Yet more than 30 years later, enthusiasts speak about it with the kind of respect normally reserved for the greatest supercars ever built. That says far more than any specification sheet ever could. Personally, I don't believe the 850CSi became legendary because of its V12 alone. Nor because it was rare. It became legendary because it represented something that almost disappeared from the automotive industry, the willingness to build a car simply because engineers believed it should exist. Looking back today, it's easy to see why the project frightened BMW's executives. The early 1990s recession had changed the luxury market overnight. Developing a low-volume V12 flagship with a 6-speed manual transmission made very little financial sense. The accountants looked at the numbers and saw enormous risk. The engineers looked at the same project and saw the greatest BMW they had ever created. In the end, business won. The M8 was cancelled, and the world never got to experience the supercar BMW had secretly built behind closed doors. But perhaps that decision unintentionally made the 850CSi even more special. Instead of becoming just another high-performance model, it became the final chapter of a dream that was never fully realized. Every time you look at a 850CSi, you're not just looking at the most powerful E31 ever sold. You're looking at the surviving DNA of a machine that almost changed BMW's history forever. Even its engine tells that story. The S70 V12 didn't disappear when the M8 died. It evolved into the legendary power plant that carried the McLaren F1 to the title of the world's fastest production car. In a way, part of BMW's cancelled supercar escaped into history anyway. That's an incredible legacy for an engine that was never supposed to leave the development department. Today, the 850CSi is recognized for qualities that were often overlooked when it was new. Its naturally aspirated V12, exclusive 6-speed manual transmission, beautifully restrained design, and extraordinary engineering have become symbols of an era when BMW built cars with mechanical character rather than digital perfection. There are no artificial engine sounds, no configurable driving modes with dozens of software settings, and no algorithms deciding how the car should behave. The connection between the driver, the engine, and the road is completely honest. And maybe that's exactly why values continue to rise year after year. Collectors aren't simply buying another classic BMW. They're preserving one of the last analog V12 Grand Tourers ever created and one of the closest glimpses we'll ever have of the mythical BMW M8 that almost was. Some cars become famous because they were successful. Others because they were revolutionary. The BMW 850CSi became legendary because it reminds us that not every masterpiece reaches the finish line exactly as its creators imagined. Sometimes the greatest automotive stories are the ones that were never fully told. And perhaps that's why, every time someone mentions the BMW 850CSi, the conversation inevitably turns to the same question: what if BMW had actually built the M8? That unanswered question has become part of the car's legend, ensuring that the 850CSi will forever remain one of the most fascinating what-if stories in automotive history. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more stories about the world's most legendary automobiles. Every subscription helps the channel continue creating documentaries like this one. And now I'd love to hear your opinion. If BMW had released the original M8 in the early 1990s, do you think it could have challenged Ferrari, Porsche, and Lamborghini, or was BMW right to cancel the project? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next documentary.